Can you look into her eyes without feeling a shiver? This was the last photo before she disappeared, and what it shows may reveal a mortal secret that no one had the courage to confront. Her eyes said it all. Even without words, even in complete silence, they pleaded for help. It was just a photo, a simple record, but something about that image paralyzed anyone who looked at it for more than 2 seconds. The gaze was not sad, it was suffocated, as if each blink was a cry for help that the whole world ignored. This image circulated among neighbors, police officers, and journalists, and everyone said the same thing. There was something there. There was a mortal secret in that gaze. And that's where the question begins, one that may never have an answer. Why did no one do anything? Why, even with so many signs, did this young woman remain invisible until she disappeared completely? Have we become so accustomed to seeing pain disguised as normality that we can no longer react? Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to discover may change the way you see the silence of the people around you. And perhaps, just perhaps, it will help you prevent other secrets like this from continuing to kill silently. This story is more than an unsolved case. It's a mirror. It's a portrait of what happens when criminal psychology intersects with everyday indifference. A young woman who seemed to carry the weight of an old trauma, masked by normal routines, restrained smiles, and that gaze, which many noticed but few understood. Experts call this a micro-expression of despair. Psychologists refer to it as a silent scream, but for those who felt it, that was the last thread of hope trying to cling to someone. Have you ever been through this? Have you ever seen someone trying to hide a cry for help behind a tired gaze? Criminal psychology teaches us that the greatest signs of abuse are not in screams but in silences, in subtle gestures, in averted glances, in unspoken words. And when society closes its eyes to these signs, it becomes complicit in what comes next. And the aftermath, in this case, it is an absence that was never explained. This young woman, who for legal reasons we will not identify, lived in an apparently stable environment. Neighbors said she was polite, that she spent hours on the balcony staring into space, always with that same expression, as if she was waiting for something or someone that never came. The day her photo appeared in newspapers was not the day she disappeared. It was the day everyone realized they had failed her, that they had ignored that gaze for too long. What stands out is how this image turned into a symbol within investigative psychology. In criminology courses, it is used as an example of how victims can give clear signals of suffering, if we are willing to see. And what if this story still doesn't have an ending, if the case is still open, as it indeed is? And if the true, mortal secret is still hidden behind that same photo? Get ready, because what comes next is even more disturbing. We are going to dive into the behind the scenes of the disappearance, the reactions of those who were around, and the psychological details that may reveal what really happened. Now, let me ask you something. At any point in your life, have you looked at someone and felt that they were asking for help, but you didn't know how to act? Sometimes a simple look carries a universe of pain, and all that person needs is someone who sees beyond the surface. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment about what has touched you so far. It could be a memory, an opinion, or just something you wish you had heard during a difficult time. We read everything with care, and your words could make a difference to someone going through something similar. If this content has captivated you so far, click the like button. It may seem small, but it helps this video reach more people. And maybe, who knows, it will reach someone who needs to understand the silent signals around them. And if you feel that this type of story, which mixes criminal psychology with real cases and human emotions, deserves to continue being told, subscribe to the channel. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow, evolve, and touch more lives with messages that sometimes the world prefers to ignore. Because silence, when shared, can finally start to be heard. It was a Tuesday morning. One of those ordinary mornings that pass unnoticed. The sun had just broken through the clouds, and the street was silent as if the world had not yet woken up. She left home with a backpack on her back and a jacket she wore even when it wasn't cold. She greeted the doorman with a rushed smile, crossed the sidewalk looking at the ground, and at that moment, No one imagined it would be the last time she would be seen safely. It was as if everything had been choreographed to seem trivial. The bus was late. Her cell phone stopped responding after 9:17 a.m., and the security camera recorded only a shadow moving away in the corner of the screen. There were no screams, no commotion, just the disappearance, silent, unsettling, devastating. And that's where what many call the hidden truth begins, the details that were there all along but no one wanted to see. What really happened after that moment is still shrouded in mystery. But what about before? What was ignored in the days leading up to it? Looking back, some things start to make sense. Small changes in behavior, in habits, in conversations. She stopped going to the place where she always had lunch, changed her social media passwords, became more reserved even with her closest friends. It was as if she were trying to protect herself from something or someone. And the most unsettling part of it all is to think, what if this silent preparation was a reflection of a decision she felt she needed to make? This story reveals a lot about mentality, about how the mind reacts when it feels cornered, when reality becomes a constant threat. Many would call this survival instinct. Others, a desperate attempt to change. But perhaps it was just an effort to maintain some control amidst chaos. Because deep down she knew she was living on the edge, and the edge sooner or later demands its price. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the days leading up to this disappearance reveal far more than they seem. It's not just about the disappearance. It's about the internal journey many victims face when they realize they are alone enough to ask for help, yet strong enough to try to escape silently. And it is in this silence that the most impactful signs tend to emerge. In gestures, in changed schedules, in averted glances, in goodbyes disguised as routine. If you've made it this far, comment, "I also see the signs." In the building, where she lived, everyone said the same thing. She was so quiet. Some added, she seemed shy but always polite, while others only remembered seeing her hurry by with hunched shoulders and downcast eyes. It was as if she made a point of taking up as little space as possible. No one ever heard her complain, argue, or raise her voice. And incredibly, it was precisely this silence that kept everyone comfortable. Because silence sometimes is easier to handle than a cry for help that requires action. But now, looking with different eyes, that silence was not peace, it was fear. And the most unsettling thing is realizing how the signs were everywhere, disguised as normality. A change in tone, a prolonged absence, exchanged glances between her and the man she lived with. The doorman even commented months later that once she tried to smile, but it seemed the smile never reached her eyes. What kind of life does someone lead when even smiling feels like an effort? This is where a hard but necessary reflection comes. In how many times do we choose not to get involved because it doesn't seem like our problem? How many times do we see someone fading away and say, "It's not my problem"? This isn't just about one specific case. It's about a culture of detachment, about a collective mentality that prefers to maintain the routine rather than face the possibility of a hidden truth. A truth that may hurt, yes, but one that can also save. Deep down, the neighbors knew something was wrong. They couldn't say what, but they felt it. It's the kind of thing that no one can prove, but everyone perceives. A strange atmosphere, a tension in the air, the sense that there was a secret hidden right there on the other side of the wall. But even so, no one asked. No one intervened. Because the idea of discovering something uncomfortable was scarier than pretending everything was okay. And it is precisely in this space, between knowing and ignoring, that many cases get lost. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding what those around her overlooked is also understanding how these stories repeat. There is a social behavior pattern that repeats in almost all invisible victims. A cycle that involves omission, discomfort, and that old phrase, "She never said anything." But did she need to say something? Was the absence of words enough to justify the lack of action? Or is it time for us to start listening to what isn't said? Comment, "Silence speaks volumes." She wasn't just shy. She was someone who lived with her shoulders perpetually hunched, as if she was constantly bracing for the next impact. There was something in her posture that suggested alertness, a state of vigilance that never rested for even a second. Psychology calls this hypervigilance, when the brain enters a constant defense mode, incapable of relaxing, as if it were stuck in an unfinished memory, and this is almost always the result of experiences that have left deep marks, traumas, that have been swallowed in silence, but continue to shape every gesture, every choice, every step. She avoided eye contact for a long time. It wasn't just shyness, it was a fear of being read. People who carry secrets often learn to hide pain in the details. A smile that's too quick, a rehearsed response, a neutral tone of voice that serves as a shield. She had become an expert at this, and the most frightening thing is realizing how much more common this is than it seems. There are many victims who live under this disguise. They function, work, study, but inside they are trapped in a routine of survival. This type of behavior doesn't appear out of nowhere. It is built, over time, like armor. With each new disappointment, every moment they ask for help and are not heard, these people learn to silence themselves. And more, they learn to adapt. They create personas, develop routines that camouflage the pain, and go on day after day as if everything were fine. But a closer look reveals that something doesn't fit. And it is at this point that fear blends with normalcy, because when pain becomes habitual, it stops drawing attention. The victim's mentality is often not one of reaction, but of containment. They remain silent to avoid confrontation. They tolerate to avoid punishment. They smile to avoid suspicion. And the cruelest part of it all is that, while they strive not to disturb, the world interprets them as distant, cold, or even indifferent. But those who live in fear have no space for spontaneity. Everything is calculated, every word, every gesture, because a slip can be costly. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding her profile isn't just about mapping out a psychological landscape. It's about revealing the behind-the-scenes of a story that has never been fully told. And when we start to see these invisible layers, we also begin to comprehend the impact that external decisions have on the internal journey of a victim. Pain doesn't disappear. It changes form. And many times, what remains is just someone trying to exist without being noticed. Type in the comments, "Silence takes form." That way I know you're with me in this story. He was someone known, someone present. He was in family photos, at Sunday lunches, in the building corridors. He never raised suspicion, never raised his voice, at least not where it could be heard. The relationship between them seemed normal to outsiders, perhaps even overly protective. But those familiar with the behind the scenes of abusive behavior know that this excessive caring, this constant need to know where the victim is, who they talk to and what they think, has nothing to do with care. It has to do with control. And control in this type of dynamic is the first symptom of something much darker. He spoke for her at social gatherings. He corrected minor remarks with fake smiles, as if training a pet in public. He said she was forgetful, that she needed to be reminded of everything, as if the infantilization disguised as affection were in fact a constant attempt to nullify her autonomy. Forensic psychologists call this behavior continuous degradation of identity, a technique of emotional manipulation aimed at undermining the victim's self-confidence until they doubt their own reality. Those who observed closely noticed a subtle pattern. Whenever she showed any initiative, he interrupted. When she talked about future plans, he belittled them. If she dressed differently, he criticized her with irony. They were not direct insults. They were poisoned comments laced with sarcasm, looks that said more than words. He dominated the environment, with a silent yet oppressive presence. At the same time, he knew exactly how to appear the opposite in front of others. Friendly, helpful, even overly kind. This type of predator is rarely impulsive. He operates with strategy, making cold and calculated decisions. He builds an invisible dome around the victim, where everything seems safe, but nothing is free. And the most dangerous part? Many of these aggressors are publicly admired. They have reputations, connections, even respect within the community. This dissonance between the external image and internal truth creates a vicious cycle where the victim finds themselves surrounded not only by fear, but also by others' disbelief. Who would believe her after all? Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding this man's profile is not just about finding a culprit, it's about unmasking a pattern that repeats in thousands of stories. It's about recognizing the signs before pain turns into absence. And more than that, it's about realizing that the hidden truth is not just in what was done, but in what was allowed to happen day after day, disguised as a normal life. Comment: not everything is what it seems. Her eyes kept returning to the scene. Even after the disappearance, even after the investigations cooled down, it was as if that initial image wouldn't let anyone rest. The photograph, an apparently mundane record, began to be revisited with new eyes, and the more it was observed, the more it became clear that something was there. It wasn't just sadness, it wasn't just exhaustion, it was a scream hidden in the depth of her gaze. As if she had been trying to warn all along but had no way to say it out loud. Experts in body language explain that the body always speaks before the mouth does. The face, then, reveals what words try to hide. According to Paul Ekman, one of the leading scholars on human emotional behavior, there are micro-expressions that last less than a second, but reveal genuine emotions like fear, anguish, contempt, or despair. And in many cases of psychological abuse, these micro-expressions appear at moments when the victim appears calm, and that is precisely what the image analysis revealed. In that gaze, there was a mixture of alertness and resignation, like someone who knows something is about to happen, but has already understood that there is no way to avoid it. And this combination is powerful, because when fear mixes with the certainty of helplessness, the result is this visual silence, deep, disturbing, impossible to forget. And that's where the big question comes in: why did no one see? Or worse, did they see but not know what they were seeing? Small actions like looking down while speaking, hesitating when answering simple questions, physically recoiling when someone approaches, are behavioral signs that psychology recognizes as indicators of emotional tension or threat. She did all of this, but in the social context, everything was labeled as reserved personality, and it is in this type of superficial labeling that opportunities to ask the right questions, to offer support, and to break the cycle are lost. The impact of these omissions is devastating, because while those around interpret her behavior as shyness, isolation, or just a phase, the victim remains trapped in her own labyrinth, sending disguised signals that no one decodes. And every time these signals are ignored, her mind registers a clear message: no one is going to save you. So she gives up trying to be heard. And when that happens, the disappearance has already begun within. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because these silent looks, these almost invisible gestures, are part of a pattern much more common than we imagine. And when we understand this hidden language, we begin to see the world, Mars, and the people around us with different eyes. Comment: I'm learning to see. When the investigation began, everything already seemed too late. Time, which should have been an ally, had become the first enemy. The absence of an immediate report, the silence of those who knew something, and the days that passed without any concrete search created a quagmire. The more one tried to advance, the more everything sank. The police arrived at the scene when the trail was already cold. There were no signs of forcible entry, no records of suspicious calls, not even a history of formal threats. Just the disappearance. And a frozen look in a photograph that was now evidence. The first witnesses interviewed contradicted each other. Neighbors who claimed to have seen her days before, others who swore she hadn't left the house for weeks. One claimed to have heard a muffled argument, but couldn't remember if it was really with her or just the loud TV from the adjacent apartment. The doorman, who saw her every day, said she seemed more introspective in recent weeks, but couldn't point out anything out of the ordinary. This was the pattern. Everything seemed strange, but not strange enough to be taken seriously. Investigators attempted to piece together the timeline, reconstruct her steps, recover neighborhood security footage, but many had already been overwritten. It was like assembling a puzzle with missing pieces and not knowing what the final image was. The questions arose in sequence. Did she run away? Was she taken? Did someone help her, or worse? Did someone take advantage of the fact that no one would ask questions for her? Each possibility came with more gaps than answers. Behind the scenes, frustration was growing. The detectives commented on the difficulty of conducting a case with so few solid elements. And when everything depends on people's memories, truth begins to slip away. Memories blur, feelings mix, and different versions take space as if they were real. And this is exactly where the hidden truth begins to fade, when time dulls the facts and silence becomes more comfortable than any revelation. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the way this case was handled says a lot about the collective mindset when it comes to silent victims. It's not enough to disappear to be searched for. Sometimes it takes a loud scream, even when there's no strength left for it. Write in the comments, the truth doesn't make noise. Time, which should heal, only worsened the wound in this case. As days turned into weeks and then into months, the silence surrounding her disappearance took on another form, that of forgetfulness. The family's pain, which once pulsed in every word, began to be swallowed by short phrases and eyes that avoided contact. The neighborhood returned to routine. The curious grew tired. The newspapers moved on to other stories. And slowly, her absence was replaced by a lack of questions. Time goes by, memories fail. The versions begin to lose clarity, like a photograph fading in the sunlight. What once seemed certain becomes doubt. Witnesses who could be key players start to forget details, swap times, confuse dates. A simple span of weeks can erase valuable clues. A security camera overwritten, a discarded receipt, a cleaned stain, an unregistered call. With each passing minute, her trail dissolves into the everyday, and while this happens, what remains is impunity. Silent, cold, disguised as a system. Because when there are no culprits, there is no justice. And when there is no justice, what remains is the feeling that everything might happen again, to anyone. The impact of this goes far beyond the victim. It spreads like an invisible poison. It weakens trust in institutions, paralyzes the courage of witnesses, and empowers those who act in the shadows. Time in these cases is not just a clock. It is a double-edged sword, cutting both ways, but never in favor of those waiting for answers. There are suspects who simply disappear from the radar. They change cities, change names, restart their lives as if nothing ever happened. And there are victims who, even without a body, even without a death record, are buried in collective forgetfulness. This is not an investigation problem. It is a direct reflection of how society deals with disappearance, as if vanishing nullifies existence, as if silence is enough to end the story. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because each day without answers is more than a technical failure. It is an assault on the memory of those who were left behind. It is a painful reminder that time, when misused, can also be an accomplice. Comment below, there's still time to remember. And what if the truth never comes? This question echoes every day in the minds of those left behind. There is no solace that fills the absence of an answer. The pain of loss is one thing. The pain of doubt is something completely different. It doesn't heal. It renews itself every morning, with every call that doesn't come, with every night when sleep doesn't arrive. And the cruelest part is that over time even hope begins to hurt, because waiting too long exhausts, it leaves marks. And when the truth doesn't appear, it not only makes those who seek it sick, but also slowly erases the memory of those who have vanished. Her family still keeps photos, objects, clothes folded, as if she were to return at any moment. This is not denial, it is resistance. It is the desperate attempt not to let time erase what the world seems to have forgotten. Every mundane gesture becomes a reminder of what is missing. An empty plate at the table, a room that remains tidy, an absence that screams even when everyone tries to pretend that everything is fine. And behind this, there is a hidden truth that no one wants to face. The silence of the innocent is also the silence that condemns. Cases like this show how much society fails those who vanish in silence. The victim didn't disappear overnight. She gradually faded away. And no one interrupted this process. It's as if, when the scream is not loud enough, it ceases to exist. And this reveals a perverse transformation in how we deal with others' pain. We start treating it like background noise, something that disturbs us for a while, but that we soon ignore. And this is exactly where the danger lies, in the habit of no longer feeling. How many victims are invisible now? How many live around us, walking the streets with the same gaze? She had, carrying a pain that no one sees, a story that no one wants to hear. Perhaps we will never know. Perhaps some of these stories never even began to be told, because not all violence leaves visible marks. Sometimes it hides behind the scenes of routine, in automatic gestures, in prolonged silences. And when society doesn't care to listen, it becomes part of the problem. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the absence of truth is not just a failure of justice. It is a crack in the fabric of empathy. And when we normalize disappearance, we participate even unwittingly in the perpetuation of pain. Comment: silence doesn't erase anyone. When a story like this unfolds, it leaves much more than an unsolved mystery. It leaves a warning, an uncomfortable reminder that pain often doesn't come screaming. It whispers, it hides in details. In behavior changes, in averted gazes, in silences that last longer than they should. And if we don't learn to hear what isn't said, we risk always being the last to realize, when it's already too late. Empathy is not just putting yourself in someone else's shoes. It is also being willing to notice when someone no longer has the strength to ask for help. It is paying attention even when everything seems normal, because what seems is not what is. And if there's one thing that this story reveals with brutal clarity, it's how much appearances can deceive. The smile may be rehearsed, the routine may be feigned, and the absence of a plea does not mean the absence of suffering. Quite the opposite. In this context, the denunciation goes beyond the formal act. It can start with a simple question: are you really okay? It can be an attentive look, a gesture of welcome, a decision not to ignore the discomfort that someone tries to disguise. Because the true impact lies in the small actions, those that interrupt the cycle, that disarm loneliness, that offer a real chance for transformation, and most importantly, that prevent stories like this from continuing to repeat themselves in silence. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we understand that listening is also an act of protection, a new journey begins. A journey of attention, of presence, of conscious choice not to be complacent. Because every ignored silence is a risk, and every person who learns to see signs can be the difference between an unanswered end and a dignified restart. Comment: I choose to truly see. If you've made it this far, it's because this story has touched you in some way. And that's precisely why it makes so much sense to have you around. If this content made you reflect, if it helped you see what might have gone unnoticed, subscribe to the channel. It's with you that I want to continue building these conversations that truly matter. Leave a comment below with the phrase, "I'm with you until the end." That way I will know who walked with me this far. And I assure you, every comment counts more than you can imagine. Oh, and if at any moment this video made you stop and think, click like. It's a simple yet powerful way to keep this connection alive and take this message to those who might need to hear exactly this right now. Now a playlist with several other stories will appear for you to follow and watch. And if you want to know about the case of the man who smiled before his death, and no one knew the reason, check out this video here and continue with me there. Let's go deeper together into another story.